So, welcome to our show. We're going to be talking about a wide variety of topics. Today, tonight, or whenever you are listening to us, we are joined by MickGyver. How are you?
Thanks, I'm good. Still sunny here in the evening.
It's 10 p.m. for him over there.
But I'm so far north, so it's daytime all the 24/7 here at the moment almost.
Yeah, so where are you joining us? Because many in the audience don't know yet.
Well, I'm from Finland, and in the middle part of Finland, at the west coast. So, yeah.
That's awesome. It's a very different kind of weather and of life when you have to deal with those light cycles, right?
Yes, indeed. Now it's very bright, and in the winter it's very dark.
Wow.
And cold. So
I bet. I've only been to Norway and Oslo and Bergen, and it was amazing. I love the place, but it's kind of close enough.
Yes.
Yeah, and also we are joined by Porkchop Express. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. Yeah, happy to be here. I have not been to Norway, but I am descendant of Norwegian heritage. So maybe one day I can convince my parents to go with me to Norway.
Wow.
But not Finland. I don't know. Maybe Mick will have me over one time or something. We can get together in person.
Yeah, sure.
I bet that'd be great. So could you guys introduce yourselves, Porkchop?
Sure. Yeah, Porkchop Express, also known as MiSTer Addons. An interesting name, if I do say so myself. The Porkchop Express reference being from Big Trouble in Little China, my favorite movie ever, and I would also say the best movie ever. Some might disagree. But just professional / hobbyist electronics designer. I'm an electrical engineer. Got my bachelor's in electrical engineering about 11 years ago. I've been working, since then as an electrical engineer, and picked up hardware design in the last couple of years, kind of with the MiSTer project that kind of pulled me out of the RGB modding, HDMI modding, console, custom SCART cable, that kind of world that I was in, and now I'm working on MiSTer stuff.
Yeah, you've been doing a lot of work that we'll cover from different angles, I guess. And thank you for joining us. And what about you, MickGyver? Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I've been interested in computers since the 80s and started programming in the mid-90s or something like this. And I studied programming also, so I have a bachelor's degree in information technology. And electronics has been, I have been interested in electronics also for quite a while. Actually, since I made my first controller for the Commodore 64. I made it using a cassette case and a sewing machine, like this foot pedal thing.
Awesome.
I've been working as a freelance programmer for quite a few years now, doing different projects. And I'm also a game developer. So I have released 2 games, like retro-style games. The latest game has been released on Steam and Switch. All the big consoles also.
Yeah, Thy Sword is the name, right?
Yes, that's the name of the game. And then I've been doing different controller projects, and the controller adapters, DaemonBite, that have become quite popular now due to their low latency. I hate latency. So.
And we have a lot to cover in that regard because Mr. Addons has been working on something related as well.
Yes.
Indeed, yep.
Yeah, we'll have a bunch to talk about, but first I'd like you, the audience, to get acquainted with your background. You've already shared a bit of how or when you got started with games, but I'd like you to describe it in a bit more detail. How did you get into games, Mick?
Well, I think I first the first thing I played was an Intellivision a friend of mine had, and then I got myself a Commodore 64, and my interest really started with the Commodore 64. I didn't do much, but like mostly gaming, racing games, and well, all kinds of games. And then moved on to an Amiga 500 and started programming around that also.
Did you get some programming practice in the C64 as well?
Not really. Some copying code from magazines and stuff like this, but no like real programming of my own. I can't say. No.
I understand, but it's always the way we all get started is by copying others' work, right? That's why open source and open hardware is so important.
Yes, yeah, true.
And so you got started with the 6502 then. And do you remember any particular Intellivision or C64 games, or Amiga games for that matter?
Well, in television, there was a racing game I liked. I don't remember the name of it. It was a top-down racing game. Quite terrible now, actually, when I've tried it. But
you should try Advanced Dungeons and Dragons on the Intellivision Cloudy Mountain. I love that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've read about it. I haven't tried it. I've seen it just like a year ago or something. I read about it. But yeah,
you should give it a try. It's lovely. That was one of the games that influenced me the most back in the day. And regarding C64 or Amiga games,
C64 I liked. I played like it's a arcade conversion of Super Off-Road. Iron Man's Super Off-Road Racer. I really liked that one. And then Bubble, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a few arcade conversions, I would say. Where I grew up, there's only forest, so there's no arcades around here.
That's awesome. And did you ever get to go to any arcade later on?
Not true arcades, but
Okay.
I visited places where they had like arcade machines, like some restaurants and ferries and stuff like this. I didn't play too many like arcade games, but quite a lot of pinball games.
Awesome.
Then, wherever I could find them
Pinball is a whole complete different beast.
Yes. My favorite one of those is Medieval Madness.
Nice. And well, preserving pinball is something I deeply respect. Well, all preservation, of course, but pinball just scares me away.
Yeah, it's very nice.
And how? What about you, Porkchop? How did you get into games?
Let's see. I think my dad bought a Vectrex before I was born, or maybe when I was really little. And so that's kind of all I knew growing up. We had like 3 or 4 Vectrex games. And then eventually, after years and years of pleading, I ended up with an NES one Christmas. And that was kind of the start of it for me. So NES was my first true love in gaming, I would say. I had an uncle in Minnesota, and we used to drive through there every summer on a family road trip. And he had an Atari 2600. So that's my only experience with anything before Nintendo was really my uncle. And then I've played a Commodore 64, but I'm just a little bit behind, maybe Mick in terms of that. I started with the NES and then pleaded for a Sega Genesis for years. I used to get on my parents' Macintosh Plus and open the Paint program and draw pictures of like Sonic the Hedgehog in the Loop, like every Christmas, just hoping and hoping. Never ended up getting one as a kid, but my friends had them. So, we did you come over to my house and play NES or Super Nintendo. I go over to your house and play Sega Genesis. And, all the way up through PlayStation 1 and 64 Dreamcast. And then I kind of hit a period where from that era on was mostly first person shooters. So pretty much played Halo up until, after college, whatnot. Got married and priorities shifted a little bit, but then kind of started getting back into retro games once I settled into my first house after getting a job, and started kind of going back and getting all the systems and playing the games that I had always wanted as a kid. I think many of us have done that.
Yeah.
All the while I'd been using emulation on the PC, but I kind of got back into the hardware aspect maybe 5 to 10 years ago.
Nice. And what about you, Mick? What happened after the Amiga?
Well, the dark ages. And I got into black metal, so...
Literal dark ages then.
Yeah. No, but I kind of... I didn't lose interest in gaming, but my interest shifted a bit to music. We started playing a few, I started playing the bass guitar and keyboards. I've been playing piano since I was a kid, but we started some bands and and of course I played quite some games on PlayStation 1, like Final Fantasy 7.
Mm-hmm.
And some helicopter game. I don't remember the name of it. It was some action game.
And well, the PlayStation was a huge leap above the Amiga in terms of the 3D and type of games, right?
Yes, it was. I tried to keep my Amiga alive as long as possible. I had a CD32 also. And
Oh, wow.
I was really hoping they would come back like Commodore, but
Yeah, I know. We all love those platforms because the sound chip in both of them, the C64 and the Amiga, they are lovely.
yes, they are really special. Nothing beats the SID chip actually when it comes to like this chip tunes sound, I think. I mean, there are a lot of other fantastic chips, but the SID chip is one or a few steps above the rest, I would say, technically.
It's very interesting, but it's also very difficult to characterize because from the testing we've done, that's not in depth, but David has made a lot of work on that. Every SID chip sounds different.
Yes, they do.
So that's really hard for preservation or for having like a standard, right, of what a SID chip should sound like. But we all have an idea of what it sounds like. That's it. But indeed, they are lovely computers. Do you still have those machines?
Yes, I have a few Amiga machines and maybe 7 Commodore 64s or something like this.
That's good. That's awesome.
And I haven't been hoarding them. I don't know. I just have a few.
Okay. And Porkchop. So when did you finally get a Sega Genesis?
It must have been roughly 2012, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably 2012 was when I got my Sega Genesis.
Any particular games that you wanted to get to play on it?
I think with Sega, I love playing Sonic, and I can play about 2 or 3 levels before I just kind of fall off the game. It's like one of those games where I can sit down and play it at the drop of a hat. I love it, but I really like exploring. And I feel like those levels, because of the jumps, because of the launching mechanism, you just kind of get flung all through the levels. And I don't know what it is. One day I'll sit down and beat all of them. I have a list of games that I'll play if I ever break both my legs and I'm just in bed. So I think those 3 are on there.
They are great games, and there's a lot of games to explore in all these platforms that you've mentioned because it's I don't know, I like that era because we had tons of options and there was so much that we couldn't experience as an individual.
Yeah, totally agree. I was the kid that had a couple systems and maybe 5 or 6 games, and I was always kind of a half generation behind. So I'd get my games at yard sales, or I'd get one game a year or two games a year for like a birthday or Christmas or something like that. So I kind of revel in, I need like 10 good games for a system, and I can play those games quite a bit. And now with, having access to so many games, it's almost overwhelming. It's like hard kind of decision paralysis of like, oh man, what do I even choose? So many good ones.
Yeah, and getting back to precisely that point, do you spend more time tinkering or playing, Mick?
I don't play much actually nowadays at all. I don't have the time for it. Or it's like gaming for me is doing stuff around the games more, like making games and making peripherals or something like this. I really love that. It's like yeah. So of course I play games to test all this stuff, but I don't. Yeah, more like some casual games that doesn't take too much time or energy.
No RPGs for you.
No RPGs. No.
Arcade games keep being the main focus, I bet.
Yeah.
Or
And
arcade style games, right? Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. I've been. It's been really fun to try. I've been try testing games from one system at a time on MiSTer, like systems I didn't have when I was a kid. It's really interesting to try and find try the best games for Neo Geo, for example, and yeah.
It's a whole different area to explore, like Porkchop was mentioning. Any particular games that have surprised you, Porkchop, that you didn't expect you to like, and they are?
Yeah, I've definitely found a few. I was doing making some repro games for myself for Super Nintendo, and one of the ones I'm trying to think, Gunman's Curse is kind of the Zelda style one for Super Nintendo. Was just like, I played it start to finish, almost couldn't put it down. But kind of like Mick, I mean, as a kid, I had infinite free time, no responsibility. And so gaming was just so easy. And then, kind of now as an adult, also like Mick said, I really like making stuff and learning. And so I do a lot of testing on games, of course, but I'm not sitting down for long sessions of playing, except for when I had COVID. I was, in my bed playing Halo and getting destroyed and realizing I'm probably too old to play first-person shooters. But otherwise, yeah, I kind of play test games, and I love quick 10, 15-minute sessions and then kind of go back to working.
I guess I know the answer to this, and everybody does, but do you play any modern games, Mick?
Not really. No, well, actually, I do racing games, some rally games.
Any particular platform that you like, or games that you like nowadays?
Yeah, I play on my laptop. I have a gaming laptop, and I really like these Dirt games. Colin McRae Dirt.
Awesome. And what about you, Porkchop?
Yeah, I got an Xbox Series X recently, and I mean, I think it's the first console I've had that's been, a period appropriate. Let's see, I had the Xbox 360 as well, but like I said, I'm always one generation behind. Forza Horizon is super fun. My kids play that to death, and I played it a good amount. I played The Messenger, played a little bit of Halo, and then I have a pretty good Steam backlog, back catalog, but you know how those are. I keep collecting, but one day I'll find the time, is what I tell myself.
Yeah, we all do. We all lie to ourselves. But it's a lovely hobby, and we'll eventually get to the ones that we care about the most, I guess. And we also now have a good idea about this, but any particular system or generation that is the most important to you, Mick?
Well, I would say it's the Amiga, because it changed put me on the path where I am now. So, but 16-bit, I think it's the perfect amount of bits.
I agree. What do you think, Porkchop?
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. The 16-bit era, I mean, I have to say NES was really, for me, like that was an inflection point in gaming. Because for a couple of generations after that, it kind of paved the way, at least in the West, in the US, that's what I experienced. And yeah, I mean, I don't really mind the early polygonal games, but I find that modern games, I mean, it's the game genres aren't expanding that much, and graphics are just getting better, which is great. I'm just not super on the latest and greatest graphics. Like to me, that doesn't make a game more or less enjoyable. I'm all about gameplay mechanics, and so for me, yeah, the 16-bit era, early 32-bit, and late Nintendo era, that's hard to beat.
Yeah, it certainly is. I think it's not just our age, because obviously our ballpark ages play a part on our preference, but I honestly believe that there's something more to that era in terms of the maturity and the kind of genre and games that were out there. And obviously, Mick already has told us that he has left the gaming for a while. One of my questions was, did you ever leave gaming for a while? Because I believe that most of us had periods where this happened. He already told us that he left a bit or for a while for playing music. What about you, Porkchop?
Yeah, kind of around the dream. So there's this debate going on Twitter, and it's just endless. PlayStation
Mm-hmm.
1 or Nintendo 64. And I'm clearly on the Nintendo 64 side. And the reason is, during that era, I was playing multiplayer games with friends like
Mm-hmm.
nonstop, like couch co-op or whatever you want to call it now. So for me, right after that, I kind of stopped playing RPGs with PlayStation 1, and then I was playing mostly multiplayer. Then I got into Halo at college. And so pretty much for a while, Tony Hawk and Halo was it. And I had to focus more on studies. So I kind of left it there for a while. And then, early adulthood priorities, I did kind of leave gaming to the side just for other things. And I've come back to it in some capacity. But I mean, it's like, am I chasing nostalgia? I really do love playing, but it's hard to recapture those experiences of when you're sitting there with your Super Nintendo or your Genesis or your friends playing Street Fighter. And yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, when it's about the multiplayer, it's a completely different game because it's what you want is companionship and the talks and the laughs, not the particularly absorptive experience for a single player game. That's different indeed. But have you went back and tried, for example, PC Engine or Neo Geo? And not for the
Yeah,
multiplayer experience, but for exploration, I mean.
yeah, for sure. Less so with TurboGrafx, although I've been through most of the catalogs. My favorite arcade genres are beat 'em ups, shoot 'em ups, and fighting games. I'm not great at any of them, but I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy shoot 'em ups probably best. And I mean, TurboGrafx has a
Mm-hmm.
deep library of that. And Neo Geo I've been emulating since the 90s. With let's see, I can't remember when Final Burn Alpha came, probably around 2000, but before that, MAME. And I never understood why I used to be able to emulate Neo Geo with such old hardware with older MAME, not realizing they were using lots of, back then they were using lots of hacks to get the game up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those are great systems.
Yeah, they are. And what about you, Mick? Have you explored back libraries, or and aside from getting back from games for music, was there any other period where you did that?
Well, I've been using emulators for quite a while, but I've never really liked them because the like PCs or whatever you use takes away something magical from the experience. It's you're distracted from like a lot of things. So
I
yeah,
kind of follow that thought. It's like I like to listen to music in a full album and not doing anything else. And it's kind of the same thing when you're on the PC, right? You have like there you work, there you talk with more people, and also the boot up and everything. It kind of makes it more difficult, right?
yeah, yes, indeed. But
Yeah.
in the late 90s, I got myself a PC also to play some games. Like I played Baldur's Gate, for example. I really loved that
Mm,
game.
that's
But
awesome.
that was probably the last big game I played.
And don't you miss going back into something like that in some manner?
No, not really. I wouldn't say.
It was good once in a lifetime thing then.
Yeah, More
good.
casual games now, I think. It suits me better.
Yeah, I fully understand. It works like dropping a coin on an arcade machine or arcade game in the morning and get started. That's good enough. And 5 minutes and you're done.
Yes. I'm also building like a visual pinball machine, virtual pinball machine. Like
nice.
a smaller one that I can have on the table.
Maybe many in the audience don't know what that means. Could you explain it for them? Because it's a really interesting area.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of, or maybe most of the classic pinball games have been recreated on like an emulator, and you can make like you can also buy these fantastic machines like virtual pinball machines that have like a big screen as a playing field, and then they also have like this backglass screen, and you can connect the DMDs, like the score screen and everything, to them if you want. It's quite a big, like really nice. And with the newer gaming PCs, you can reduce input lag quite a lot. So if you have a high refresh rate, I have a screen, the playing field screen on my machine is 144 hertz. And it also has FreeSync, so it's really like fluid. The ball movement is really nice. And then I've made a specific like a DaemonBite encoder also that supports like this plunger, analog plunger. Yeah,
that's awesome. Is it related to the Control arcade USB controller that you have?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagined as much. And how did you ever find about MiSTer Porkchop?
Oh, that would be Smoke Monster for sure. I had heard about the Mist project prior to him, but once he started kind of really broadcasting his love for MiSTer, I had just finished a full set of custom individual shielded core SCART cables for every one of my consoles. I bought a Saturn one, but long story short, I bought some coax cable from Tinkerplunk online, and I just slaved through making all these SCART connectors into my G-SCART switch, into my OSSC, and then MiSTer came out, and I looked at the weeks or months of work I had done, and I thought, okay, this is the future. Ended up actually, to the dismay of many, selling a lot of that hardware because I could tell that MiSTer was going to be the good enough solution where if the cores aren't perfect, maybe I won't know, and maybe there are some features on the core that my original hardware plus flash card plus SCART plus video digitizing system, it just simplified it so much. So to me, it was like, it was a light bulb moment.
Yeah, I bet. But Smoke Monsters has always been a huge influence for many of us, and who had this huge show that we hope someday maybe he'll return. We don't know, but he made a lot of progress towards creating community, as you guys do, and we'll touch on that later on. But then you were just into that rabbit hole for upscalers and shielding cables when you found about MiSTer. Did you went directly to open source current converter, or were you into some older upscalers before that?
No, I actually, OSSC was my first one. I picked up an old Pioneer Plasma, and it had interchangeable. It was a professional plasma, so it had interchangeable interface cards, and I had one that was a BNC RGB input, and it supported 15 kilohertz, but there were some weird scaling artifacts, and I tried. I kept looking for the frame MiSTer, and it was like $300, and at that time that was just too much money, and so I eventually did OSSC was my first.
That's really nice. So it was really a very interesting time to get into this, because it was the perfect transition for you. And what about you, Mick? How did you find about MiSTer?
To be honest, I don't really remember. I think it was probably something Amiga related, like on the English Amiga board, the forum, or a Facebook Amiga group or something like this. I knew about the MiST project or the machine, but But when I heard about MiSTer, I knew this was going to be the excuse me shit. Yeah. It was like seemed too good to be true, actually.
And was it difficult to get your hands on one?
Well, I ordered DE10 Nano from Mauser, I think, or DigiKey, and then built the rest of the stuff myself.
And was it obviously you have experience in that, but was it difficult to build it yourself?
Well, not for me, I wouldn't say, because I was already familiar with soldering and stuff like this, and tinkering a lot. So I made this. I don't know if you've seen it, like this wooden Amiga-looking case for.
Yeah, I saw that. If you want to check that out, it's on his site. You can check out DaemonBite. I'm going to put the link in the chat in a minute. But then, how did you get into making stuff for MiSTer, Porkchop?
Well, that's a good question. First, before I forget, hey Mick, where can we follow your virtual pinball setup? Because I've for years looked at that, looked at the posts, dreamed about it. I'd be curious to see where your build ends up if you want to showcase it when it's done.
Yeah, it's been. I haven't documented anything about that actually, so I don't know. It's nowhere at the moment.
I'll remind you in a year if it's not done by then. We can we'll talk then.
Yeah, I'm making it. It's not like super fancy looking. I wanted it to be like modular, so I can easily put it away and take it like this when I use it. Yeah. So, but yeah, maybe I will like upload some pictures of it when it's ready and I've painted it and stuff.
Right on. To answer your question, Artemio, I, like many people, I ordered a set of 10 USB hubs, 10 I/O boards, and 10 SD-RAM PCBs from PCBWay. And, prior to that, I had been doing console mods. So when I ordered my group from PCBWay, I just listed the other 9 because I only ever wanted one for myself. And
yeah, but for those listening in, it's you buy a bunch of them because you have to order them that way, right? Sorry.
Yeah, they have minimum order quantities. So it's like 5 or 10. And so, I was forced to buy the 10. And I thought, well, I might as well solder these. Listed them on, I think, back then it was still the Atari forum before we had our own forum. And those sold so fast, I immediately dropped all of the console mods I was doing, the Ultra HDMIs, the high def NES, RGB modding consoles. I just basically pushed those to the side and just ordered another batch immediately. And just from there, I started from my batch of 10. Then I ordered a batch of 30. Then I ordered a batch of 100. And then I was basically just coming home from work, spending time with family and soldering all the time. So that's kind of the genesis of how I started this little side gig here.
And it has grown to a huge proportion, and we all thank you for it. And,
my pleasure. It's gratifying.
Oh, it's really impressive because you guys have to deal with a lot of stuff. Like it's physical stuff. You have to deal with logistics. You have to deal with imports, exports, probably 3D printing, and a bunch of things like orders and shipping. And man, that's so much work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it for sure, but it is a lot of work. There's a lot of just running any kind of small business, or the taxes, like you said, the tariffs, the import fees, the parts that aren't right, or the messed up design, or just so many different hidden costs and things that eat away at your time. But again, so worth it in the end.
Yeah, because every single part of that for you guys it's a bit of frustration, right? Every single issue that just stops you from just doing the thing, I bet it feels a bit frustrating, and it's like, okay, I deal with this and move on, right?
Yep, it's sometimes you just have to say, well, I'll get it next revision.
No, and just like Walrus has in the chat, customer service. That's also a huge part of this because you have to be civil and grow a community, and I deeply respect you guys for doing that.
Mick's my role model.
And how did you get started on building stuff for MiSTer, Mick? I mean,
Well, yeah, I just I had like this zero delay encoder or something like this, I think, for an arcade stick I was building. And then I kind of naively thought that it had like zero delay. But when then I saw some test results, or I think, and then I saw how terrible the controllers, like how much input lag they have and stuff like this. So then I decided I need to make something to have smaller input lag.
This is a topic that I bet a lot of people will be interested in the terms of the details. So don't feel like we are diving too deep. I believe that this will be good. What makes a latency from the controller an issue?
I think most of the time it's maybe not that you feel or like notice the actual input lag. It's just that the game feels sluggish, or like it's not as fun, or like much more difficult than you remember it being.
Floaty controls.
Yeah, and every single bit of lag or delay just adds up, right?
Yes, and it's it's not, if the lag is not consistent. Also, like then it gets much worse when it varies. Like,
and you both have worked on this, but how does a controller work when you connect it to something like the MiSTer?
Well, on MiSTer, of course, there's two methods, like the snack method, or like to have like a direct input, so it's directly wired to the core itself. Then you don't get the same latency as it would be on the real machine. And then you have the other option, like through USB. And luckily, the MiSTer supports 1 millisecond input, or like, input polling. So thanks to that, you can make a really fast adapter for classic controls.
What Mick says is that polling is the method by which the operating system, in this case the Linux side, I'm guessing, polls the controller per second. It does 1,000 cycle, if I'm not mistaken, just you said, a 1 millisecond polling cycle, right?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
So that gives, just so you have an idea, typically a console is 16 or 20 milliseconds, depending on NTSC or PAL, frame, right? And every console or game has a cycle where it displays everything, reads the controllers, processes the next frame. That's where the controllers are pulled in from the console side or the game side, and then the cycle goes on again. What can you tell us about how these cycles are aligned or unaligned depending on the polling size or speed?
Yeah, so for an NTSC game, it's like you said, it's 16 milliseconds per frame. So once a frame, usually the game polls the controls. And when you have a USB controller, then that maybe is polling, say, every 10 milliseconds. Then the lag can vary from about 0 milliseconds up to 26. So you get a lot of jitter. So if you're using a USB controller, you want the polling speed to be as fast as possible to reduce the jitter.
Mm-hmm. And what does this jitter cause?
Sorry?
So what does jitter does when this happens. I mean, trying to explain to the public what happens.
Yeah, yeah. So it causes like inconsistent input lag. So you cannot, you don't know, you cannot even if you are really consistent yourself when gaming, like pressing the button at the same moment each time. If you have jitter with the controls, then perhaps one press is missed, or like it happens the next frame, and the next press is like happens the frame before you meant it, and so on.
Yeah, this adds up. So you've been working on a database, Porkchop, regarding regular in the market stuff. What are the ranges that you are seeing out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. As bad as like 30 to 40 milliseconds for, I think I want to say it's the Wii U through Bluetooth, or maybe the Switch. I think it's the Wii U has maybe the worst, and then wired all the way down to 0.7 milliseconds. The iBuffalo, I think, is right at the top with like 0.69 milliseconds. This is off the top of my head, but in that top group of probably the top 5, mixed DaemonBite stuff right up there. Boot Sector's RetroPad, and then Boot Sector did the firmware for MiSTerCade. So it's all right under the 1 millisecond average, which, if you think about it, a millisecond is such an insignificant amount of time. I mean, we can't even really perceive milliseconds. So pretty much zero. Not technically, but in practice, pretty much zero.
Yeah, it's a term of perception, just as you said, and also about things adding up. But technically, if you are 1 millisecond polling, or if you have that 1000 hertz polling, you're gonna fit into the frame. Certainly 99%. Well, I'm just pulling that number out of my head, but you're gonna be in the exact frame where it's needed almost always, right?
Yeah, it's in about 90 to 100%. I think it's like 93% is if you're under a millisecond, you're that probability. And like Mick was saying, it's all probabilistic because most players can't time frames. It's just about where does your button press fall within the frame, and as long as your average is low and your standard deviation, basically your grouping is tight, because it doesn't vary much from button press to button press, then it's a very satisfying game experience that really, to me, makes it feel like I remember as a kid, as opposed to maybe some of the slower emulation that I've played in between there.
Yeah, and this is possible, or the difference with other systems is basically because the system is not doing anything else. This is dedicated to this specific task. And talking about that, Troy asks why can't the USB adhere to the original console polling rate?
Yeah, it can't at the moment. It can't, but perhaps in the future. Like, but the kernel, the Linux kernel, would need to be modified for that to kind of to synchronize the input polling, the USB polling, with the game, or like the core polling.
Yeah, this is like a general solution. Sorry. Go ahead, please, Porkchop.
Oh, in my opinion, that wouldn't really change anything, because the game's checking once a frame, but if the system is checking more often, that is, and it's holding that input ready for the system, then the result is the same. If you make the frame, you do. If you don't, probably next frame. Unless you're the Wii U controller, in which case it might be another frame after that.
Yeah, it's just like it feels like it would be more authentic. I guess that's where the question comes from. But in practical terms, it could be even less precise, right?
Yeah, there's always a possibility. There's sometime I'm gonna get some competition going, but there's an NES ROM called, I think it's Mashy Mash, and it counts your button presses per second. And when I was developing MiSTerCade, I used it to see kind of what the performance was for the input encoder. But it's pretty cool. You can set your time period, and then you just press the button as fast as you can. So it's MiSTer's pretty good in that aspect.
Yeah, I bet it is. And Mick, what pushes you to make the selection of controllers that you support on your devices?
Well, I just want I want the experience to be as good as possible, and I try to make the best of it, like to support as many controllers as possible. Like that, I try to do the best that I can. Just
Yeah, but what does it involve? That's probably what I meant. Because
okay.
every controller is different and has different ways of being pulled and read, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry, I misunderstood. But
No, I didn't explain myself properly, sorry.
uh, well, it's hard to really explain, but I try to visualize like something. If first I use the what would I say, like the normal method of interfacing the controller, or like using a simple technique to see that it works. And then I try to figure out different ways to improve. Like, how can I reduce latency here? Like, if the code needs to wait, can I do something else while it's waiting, for example, and so on. It depends on the protocol of the controller, and then
Yeah,
just
exactly.
try to find the best solution how to do it.
And I bet the issue of having the controller ports is a huge part of it, right? Like the parts.
Yes, yeah.
What's kind of like the process that you follow for creating this?
Chaos. I don't know.
That's
No,
good. I understand.
but I try to when I try to solve a problem, I try to make, like, I don't think about the whole like big problem, or like that I need to solve at once. I try to like break it up into pieces to see like how can this small thing be improved. Like what can I do to improve this, to remove some CPU cycles from this instruction or something. And yeah,
Yeah, it's
but I start in a simple way, and then I think about ways to make it better. Like,
yeah, it's good. It's like in software development, you first test it and then you improve it, and that's the proper way, I think.
yeah, I think so.
And the chat is asking about the difference between a snack and LLAP. So, what could you tell us about that?
Do you want to take that, Porkchop?
Oh, sure. So there are three kind of input options for MiSTer right now. There's the USB, which Mick's done a really good job talking about and developing for. It's basically, you can probably find a controller that you like that plays extremely well, and you're not going to get anything much better than that from any of the other solutions. So if you like an off-the-shelf USB controller, look up on the website I published that Lemonici helped me with. Look up the latency. Done. Then Mick's done a great job making use of original controllers. So Super Nintendo Genesis using his DaemonBite adapters, as well as other solutions. And he's basically running a USB human interface device, polling the controller, and then reporting that to MiSTer. So that's a great solution there. Extremely low latency. You have LLAPI, which is a protocol that was worked on just before 1 millisecond polling was around. And the idea with LLAPI is kind of like what the comment in chat said, checking for inputs at the end of the frame. So just before the V blank of the next frame, it checks for inputs, and it only does this once per frame. The idea being it's called just in time. Like, it's just checking right before it needs to know, and the results on that are pretty good as well. But it does require forked cores because it was never part of the main repository. That's a different topic. And then Snack is, for all intents and purposes, absolutely zero latency. All the snack board is are level shifters because most of the old controllers are 5-volt logic, and MiSTer's FPGA, like most modern devices, the pins on it are only rated for 3.3 volts. So all snack is doing is taking the 5-volt logic coming from the controller, shifting it down to 3.3 volts, and shoving it into directly into the FPGA core. So it bypasses the Linux layer, bypasses the USB pooling, and that's why you can get zero latency there.
Yeah, only latency is from the software that's running in the core, not from the hardware, right?
Yep, and to get your light gun latency working, you have to be within a couple scan lines, which is in pretty much in the few microseconds. So it's down there to the point where you can't really measure it easily, but it's pretty much zero.
And you mentioned MiSTerCade, which is an amazing project, and in it you had to deal with controller input as well, because you had to connect the control panel from an arcade or super gun or whatever to the MiSTer. What is like?
So I mean, I'm just glad there was eventually an arcade standard, which is JAMA, to make a defined pinout, because otherwise it would be absolute chaos forever.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the standard forever, but during the kind of bronze to golden era of gaming from the 80s to through the 90s, JAMA ruled, and you could grab any PCB. And Artemio, you're the expert here with original arcade hardware, but grab any PCB and plug it into a JAMA cabinet, and you're pretty much off to the races, with few exceptions. So thankfully, the pinout was defined. I just had to choose a microcontroller, and like I said, I take no credit for that firmware. Boot Sector of RetroPad fame, he did all the heavy lifting. I mean, we spent a lot of time in chat troubleshooting because he didn't have the hardware in front of him, but trying to figure out which features you wanted to incorporate. So,
and button bouncing.
Yeah, debouncing, and then I tried to get some well-known arcade people to give me some feedback because, again, I actually loved the arcades as a kid. If I can take just a minute, we had a putt-putt, which was a mini golf go-kart arcade in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is where I was growing up, kind of elementary school. And every Saturday they had $5 Super Saturdays, and you got 50 tokens, like candy bar and a drink, and 2 go-kart races for $5.
Wow.
And
so, like a dream.
My dad is a cheapskate. He would admit that. So, but even he would let me go to putt-putt. So this was like Ninja Turtles, original Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat 1 and 2, Puzzle Bobble, Terminator 2, the arcade game. This is that really like peak arcade era. So that was, my love for arcade stems back to that. Those were like some of the best memories I had of gaming as a child.
I think a lot of people can relate to that particular memory that you just implanted in every one of us. I feel nostalgic for your experience right now.
Yeah.
That sounds great. And, have you ever found something like debouncing on console controllers, Mick?
Well, if the controller is bad, I would say there can be some bouncing, like with the rubber being broken or something like this, but usually there's no bouncing on the console controllers. But sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, but the arcade controls are really bouncy.
What can you tell us about what is bouncing and what causes it, and how do you get around it?
Yeah, it's when you press an electrical switch, it will there's usually some kind of spring in it or something that will make so when you press the button, it will bounce. So it's if you have a fast way of detecting the switch, then you will detect the bouncing on and off. So the switch is like pressing really quickly several times before it gets like pressed 100%. And
if I could add to that, it's just It's like mechanical vibration. So you have the spring and you press the button down and it comes back and it'll oscillate and hit a few times. So if you're checking for all that, it's going to register maybe 3 button presses versus 1 if you're pulling too fast.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
And yeah.
No, sorry. Please go ahead, Mick.
And to fix this, you need to make some kind of logic, either or like a hardware solution that removes this bouncing, and it can be made in hardware or in software.
What do you think? Is it easier, or do you have any preference? Because doing it in software feels like second guessing. I believe.
Yeah, it's both work. It depends, but to have the least amount of input lag, it's better to do it in software, because when you do it in hardware, there will be like a rise time of the switch, like the electrical signal. So it will introduce some lag, even if it's not much. But then also with software, it's been somewhat problematic, because the software solutions have been they have also added input lag.
And many might ask why, and it's because you have to have the event in the past to analyze it.
Yes. So I did it differently than with my arcade encoder. So instead of like testing what is happening with the switch, is it like bouncing? Is this really a button press? I need to wait a little bit before, like, this is the code talking here now. Like, I need to wait a little bit before I know if this is a real button press or not. And this will cause input lag. So instead of this, I made the bounce logic in a way so instantly when the software like detects a signal switch from on to off or off to on, it will output that to USB, and like it will interpret it as a real button press. And then after that, it will wait for like 10 milliseconds or something before it lets the like signal change. So this way there will be almost no added input lag, even if you have a proper debounce logic. Yeah. It only adds like a couple of microseconds of input lag.
Yeah, because you're letting the first input go through, and then you just discard the second misinterpretations in such scenarios.
Yeah, you ignore the bouncing altogether, and then after like 10 milliseconds or something, you let the input change again to like an off state. Because a really fast button, I tried pressing a button, an arcade button, as fast as I could, and measured how long it took to, like, how long was the button pressed if I really just nudged it, like, really quickly. And it was, I wasn't able to have it pressed less than 30 milliseconds. So
yeah, reality is slower, right?
Yes, I'm sure someone else like faster can do it faster, but then I use the 10 milliseconds as like.
And did you notice any difference between different brands of buttons?
Yeah, they are different, and I wouldn't say necessarily the expensive ones or like Sanwa or Seimitsu are better than others. Well, probably they are a bit, but they all seem to bounce, I think. At least the ones I've tried. I don't know. Porkchop probably has more experience in this.
No, I mean, similar to you, I think on that mashy mash thing, I was getting like 21 button presses in 1 second period. So obviously, you start off really fast, and throughout the second, your muscle kind of gets worn down. But I opted for a software debounce. With MiSTer Gate, if you can visualize what a bounce looks like, it's a sinusoid that dampens. It's a damp sinusoid, and so if you do hardware filtering, like Mick mentioned, you're basically putting a resistor and capacitor. You're figuring out the frequency you want to do a low pass, and that's going to create a rising slope, and it's going to take longer to get to your peak that's being detected. And so I opted for the software approach, kind of like what MiSTer was saying, or what Mick was saying. with MiSTerCade. And so I have one Astro City cabinet. That's my original one I got to test MiSTerCade with. And I put all new controls in it. And throughout testing it, I've noticed that player one, button one, the one that gets the most love, has started to already get a little bit more bouncy than it used to be when I got it. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, sometimes I'll get some weird inputs when I'm trying to map a control, and then I realize, oh, these are 20-year-old buttons. Replace the button, done. So yeah, these buttons do, they're mechanical, and they have a spring and contacts, and so definitely the hardware does factor in. The buttons do factor in, but I use kind of Sanwa and Famitsu interchangeably, and they both seem pretty good.
I kind of imagined. I'm not throwing this to anybody in particular, but having a test core for this kind of thing would be awesome. That tells you if your buttons are worn out in some way.
I bet Jimmy Stones could help us out since he just released that new input test core. But yeah, I have plenty of, I have suggestions for software for days. Just asking. I'm just not good at software, so also ignore my suggestions.
Yeah, it would be. I don't know. Even for console controllers, it would be amazing to know if they're getting bad in some way. I love measuring stuff like that for an end user side.
Yeah, that'd be great. Maybe have it say press a button 10 times and see how many of those 10 it registers or something like that. Some kind of just simple user feedback.
Sounds great.
That'd be interesting, I bet. And can you tell us about the products that you have at your site, Mick?
Yeah, well, I sell a few different of the DaemonBite adapters, like various versions. At the moment, they are all out of stock. I started getting burnt out from making them, so I had to take a small break. So, but I've been.
You have Super Nintendo, Genesis, NES, SNES, different amount of ports, right? Neo Geo.
Yes, and the newest add-ons are like the 4-port ones. And I'm currently making now printing cases for those 4-port ones. So I will add them to my site any day now. Also.
So basically, if you want to use any of those classic controllers on your MiSTer or a PC, right? These adapters are a very good solution for that, because you also offer the Control Arcade USB controller and all the variations that I did mention. Yes. And you mentioned now that you are printing the cases, right? How big is 3D printing for you?
Yeah, it's like a revolution to be able to 3D print, but it's such a hassle. I mean, the 3D printers require maintenance all the time, and it can be quite frustrating, but still a really good thing to be able to do it. But I would really like to do it a different way. I'm looking into methods of not having to use the 3D printer, actually.
Yeah, so, I had this question about regarding 3D printing versus molded plastic and how difficult and the scale of that. Sorry.
Yeah, it's money, an investment you have to do if you want to do injection molding, but I'm sure it would be worth it.
And what about you, Porkchop? Yeah, I like Mick said, man, 3D printing is so great for prototyping. There is no replacement. I guess you could carve it out of clay or something if you're some kind of artist, but from doing CAD modeling to test fitting and prototyping, there's no replacement for 3D printing. In fact, I don't know how many people know, but I used to sell 3D printed cases, and I bought a 3D printer. It was kind of a dud, so I bought another one. It worked great. So I started running that 24/7, and I hired somebody to come over and just keep an eye on my printers while I was at work and taught them to solder. And at one point I had 4 printers running 24/7, just printing cases. But those cases, I mean, they take 12 to 15 hours to print. And if you get a clogged nozzle, there goes that. So it's like Mick said, they're so great, and it's hard for production. It's really hard to keep up with demand doing 3D printing, but things are getting better, and injection molding would be sweet. Just you got to get the scale up because the molding costs a couple thousand. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. And you mentioned also the cases. You've been pushing a lot of stuff, of projects out the door this last few months, and have been working on amazing stuff like the aluminum case, right?
Yeah, that was actually, I started that, I want to say February of last year. I contacted a design company. I started with 3D printed cases, and then I got a laser cutter that
Mm-hmm.
I was doing acrylic cases, and the laser cutter caught fire and almost took out my house.
Wow,
So
really?
I wisely bought another one, and I just had to monitor it all the time. And so I'd sit out in my garage and sweat in the humid Maryland summers trying to laser cut cases, and that went well as well. But I just only have so much time, so I tried to figure out a way to outsource the design, and thankfully found a company that I was able to send the boards to, and they came up with a prototype, and I 3D printed it and got some feedback, and then they sent me some prototypes, and the rest is history now. The second round is almost sold out. I have some cases sitting off to the side to, fix orders of small defects, and I'll list them as I feel comfortable that the orders that are out there now are settled. But yeah, I have to rely on outsourcing just because I do have a day job, and I try to balance my time, but probably not very well.
Yeah, we all have issues with balancing time, I guess.
Yeah.
Regarding the aluminum case, it's not just the looks, right? There's another more important factor there.
Sure, yeah. So the aluminum case, first of all, people like aluminum. I could have done powder coated, which may have been a little bit cheaper, but went with anodized because that seems to be the premium finish for electronics nowadays. And my goal for the case was to make it passively cooled because I had seen lots of people. Well, I guess to back up a little bit, the I/O board comes with a cooling fan on it. It can be run at 3.3 volts or 5 volts, and the one that I sell is just kind of a basic 5-volt fan run at 3.3 volts. Well, I didn't realize how big of a topic fan noise is, but it's a huge topic. So for a while, I was buying Noctua fans retail on Amazon and putting those on the boards, but that was extra time I had to spend taking old fans off, putting new ones on. Then I figured out I could buy them directly from Noctua. I think Greg from Laser Bear gave me that hint. So I was ordering them direct from Noctua, and I was in talks with Noctua of making a MiSTer fan that would have the correct cabling and only have
Mm-hmm.
2-inch long fan cable. And I was about to do that, and then I kind of jumped on the aluminum case design. So the design is there's a thermal pad that sits on top of the Cyclone 5 FPGA, and then there's this little L-shaped bracket that comes down and connects to the top of the case, and that provides your passive cooling, and that basically sits into channels with the bottom U-shaped part of the case, and altogether cools the FPGA, and yeah, it does a pretty good job. I haven't heard of any heat related complaints from my first round, so I think it's adequate. The FPGA on MiSTer is rated for pretty high temperatures, like 80 to 100 degrees C, and my case measurements put it at 40 tops. Of course, the FPGA does not have an internal thermocouple, so there's no way to get a software reading. So all of the readings I've done were just external, and then I did stability testing with the Doom AO46 and the MemTest cores, leaving them on for long periods of time. But it seems like it's adequate for MiSTer. At least all of the ones I've sold are doing a good job so far.
Also, you posted thermal pictures of it. It's not just like anecdotal or from performance. You also measured it directly, right?
Yeah, I had a little FLIR gun, forward-looking infrared is what FLIR stands for, and I just recently got one of these little smartphone FLIR 1 devices that
Mm-hmm.
takes an image with your phone's camera as well as with a thermal camera at the same time, and that's much better. So if anyone's looking for a cheap FLIR, check out the mobile, the phone hardware accessories because they're pretty cool.
It's such a fun toy to have around, right? A thermal camera. You learn so much about thermodynamics.
Yep, and also useful for troubleshooting hardware. If you have a short somewhere, you'll be able to see it. Of course, Louis Rossmann, who's famous for MacBook repairs online, he still prefers just putting some isopropyl alcohol on the board, dousing the board, and seeing where it dries up fastest to find shorts. But lots of different tricks to troubleshoot original hardware.
Yeah, I prefer the thermal camera, but just because I have it, and I'm not as good as Louis, not even in the same, in different, completely different leagues. When I repair stuff,
that makes two of us. Yeah, that makes two of us.
And you're way better than I am.
Well, just soldering is all about flux, temperature, low pressure, right equipment, and some patience. It's not too hard. Just
ventilation, safety.
Yes, ventilation, of course. Yep.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. I'm not good at it, but I can handle an iron at least. And how about, I was going to ask you guys, how about the pandemic and how has it affected in terms of e-commerce and imports and exports? Mick?
Yeah, it's been a challenge, I must say. And since I live in Finland also, and it's not near a big city or something, so it's been slow, like to get parts and to then also to send stuff out. I think the record for sending something when it was at the worst, it took 4 months to arrive in USA. Like,
has it improved? I mean, in general for you and getting the stuff to your place?
Yes, it has improved a lot now.
Good.
It's faster to get parts, and also shipping is faster from here. Even it's not like normal, but still much better.
Did you have issues with stuff getting out of stock for you? The parts that were difficult to source?
Well, now they have like gone out of stock quite a lot of parts. Or like when I was designing some new versions, and especially some other CPUs are out of stock now, or like really expensive to get. So that's a problem, and I hope it will be back to normal sooner rather than later.
And what about you, Porkchop?
Yeah, the beginning of the pandemic was pretty hard. I started hand soldering everything, and then I hired someone to solder for me and trained them. But the demand for MiSTer is pretty great, and so I ended up a good friend in the retro gaming community shared his contact with me for his PCB assembly factory, and so that factory is in China, and unfortunately got shut down for a good period of time. So part of success in running a retro parts store is maintaining stock but not overstocking. And during that time where the factory was shut down, I was at that solder bench 13 hours some days soldering SDRAM, trying to maintain sanity just to keep up. So it was hard, but a couple months into the pandemic, they kind of got back on their feet, and I was able to thankfully keep up with supply. But there are other things, like we talked about, the trade war a little bit between the US and China, and those import fees hitting. That has impacted. And otherwise, I've been able to, like Mick mentioned, the cost of microchips right now, microcontrollers is insane. So for MiSTer Kate, I ended up having to figure out a solution there to get enough microcontrollers, because they're just, they went from $2 to $15 a piece, and that kind of kills your margin there when you're planning on a certain price. So I've had to adapt, flexible, but that's the name of the game. That's the risk of doing a small business.
Yeah, it's been really hard this times. And on that topic, do you do, for people listening, do you do international shipping to any country in the world?
I do, yes. When I lived in Maryland, I moved from Maryland to Idaho in February. When I lived in Maryland, I did DHL, and it was, in my opinion, great. But my experience with shipping is every single person you ask will have a horror story about DHL, UPS, FedEx, USPS. It doesn't matter. So I offer multiple shipping options. Right now, I'm using UPS for international.
And what about you, Mick?
Yeah, I ship internationally also, and I'm using I really have no options to ship from here other than the state-owned shipping company like Postal Service. So,
and does that postal service offer the equivalent for EMS, or it's just regular mail with signature? Or
yeah, it's like it's called air mail or something, so it's shipped by air. But to get like a signature is more expensive, or to get expedited shipping is more expensive also.
And
But
if somebody requires that, would you be able to provide that by any means, or how would they contact you?
I would but not through my shop at the moment, because it's it's a hassle. And the reason is the clerks here at the parcel service, like the offices, they really don't know how to do it. So I have to explain it always how they should do it, and it takes a lot of time. And also I've seen that option is actually less reliable than sending it without tracking.
Wow.
It's amazing. But even sending without tracking has been really reliable, actually. There's not many packages lost, I would say. And if a package is lost, then I always refund the total amount.
It's great to hear. Any experience with South America? And obviously you're talking about Canada and the US mainly, I guess, and Europe. But South America and Asia?
Yes, it has worked so far. Even if I haven't had too many customers from South America or Asia, but yeah, it has worked for the most part.
Here's one question for you, Mick. His Mortal Floater says, I have an idea for a DaemonBite add-on board. Can I just make that? I don't want to violate some license or something.
Or a DaemonBite, sorry?
Oh, he says, I have an idea for a DaemonBite add-on board. Can I just make that? I don't want to violate some license or something. I'm new to making stuff, so that means I can't sell it, correct?
Yeah, the DaemonBite adapters are open source, so they are. You can modify the code freely.
Good. So there you have it. If the audience has any questions, please just send them to the chat, and we'll make our best effort to answer them. Meanwhile, can you tell us a bit about the SECless HDMI cables, Porkchop?
Yeah, so I kind of noticed myself. I got a projector and noticed that MiSTer was interfering with it, and had heard others. Sorry, when I say interfering with, the CEC, which is a protocol that electronics devices can use to pass commands to each other. In other words, I can use my set-top box remote to control the volume on the TV. When I power on the set-top box, it turns on the TV. Things like that. That MiSTer interferes with it because of the way that its HDMI port has that CEC pin grounded, which kind of disrupts everything else connected via HDMI. So I was thinking about just making a little PCB adapter, and I made one, and it seemed to work. And I put a couple jumpers on there so I could open or close different pins, and found out that pretty much if I open the CEC pin, meaning leave it floating on the cable on one end, then the rest of the CEC devices hooked up to my receiver, my display, that they were pretty happy. So I went ahead and found a company who could just professionally make those cables with just that one pin disconnected, and they seem very responsive, and so yeah, it's been a good fit.
Yeah, so it's basically for those experiencing issues with what kind of issues would they expect to have?
So for example, I use Apple TV. I am an unabashed Apple fan. They're not perfect, but overall, I use a lot of their products. And I can normally wake up my projector and receiver with my Apple TV remote by pressing the main menu button. With MiSTer connected, sometimes what I'd get is everything would turn on. Sometimes my receiver wouldn't turn on, but my projector would. So the beauty of CEC is that you can, in theory, use one remote to control all of your audio video equipment in a setup. And with MiSTer, it was just sporadic, meaning, sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't, sometimes nothing would work. And so you're having to get out all of your remotes every time, which kind of defeats the point of CEC.
Okay. Mick, Cigarette asks us, is it allowed to make original hardware and sell them, and including DaemonBite firmware on the hardware?
Yeah, the code is GPL 3.0, so you are allowed to use, like, to use it and use it commercially also.
You only have to abide to the license and release any modifications and link to the...
Yes, any modification to the code needs to be also like made public if you do it. And so I don't know what to add. So it's, I'm just asking people not to like sell something using DaemonBite, as it's like my business name here in Finland. I know it's maybe... Yeah, to name something DaemonBite compatible is a preferred method, I think.
So there you go, Radbot. And the Matt Hargett says, the DualShocks 3, 4, and DualSense are notable for having very low latency. DS3 TTP being less than 23 milliseconds. DS4 being less than 18 milliseconds. When paired with the same console, do you think MiSTer support for those controllers will ever approach their native latency, wired or wireless?
I'll take this one. I was recently told that one we saw today, the driver for PlayStation controllers was just updated, and then it was tweaked additionally for MiSTer. And so I just ordered a DualSense 5 controller because I didn't own one. And we'll do my best. I have a pile of controllers waiting to be latency tested. I kind of got burned out spending several days in a row testing all day, and it's pretty involved to test. And the 8-bit DOE controllers in particular burn me out because they have several different compatibility modes, wired and wireless. So one controller can result in 8 tests. So anyways, supposedly the latency should be better now on all of the Sony controllers with MiSTer, but I have not had time to check it out. Maybe in a few weeks.
So we'll have a question for Porkchop says, are controller latency tests for the chart still ongoing? If so, is there a place that people can send their devices to be tested for addition to the chart in the future?
Yeah, sure. I was taking some, I was accepting people sending controllers before I moved. It's probably up until October or November of last year when I started putting my house on the market and, going through the rigmarole of moving. But since settling here, I have a new PO box. I just have had zero time to test controllers. I will take submissions because there are some notable ones that I would like. In fact, somebody's sending me the Astro City Mini USB controller. But other than that one, I've actually had more submissions from people just sending me the results of their latency testing, which is beautiful. I mean, I would love for everyone to do their own latency testing, but I also understand that not everyone feels comfortable soldering to the button contacts or to a microcontroller or something. So yes, short answer is I will be accepting submissions probably once my life settles down a little bit.
And now that you slightly described the method, what does it imply for anybody interested to do this? What software, what hardware, what's the process?
Sure. So you need a microcontroller. I've been using the Artemio micros just like Mick is using for his DaemonBite project. And you need a microcontroller. You need to open up your controller and wire buttons to it. And you need a custom core. It's based off the NES core. But all of it, there's a tab in the big spreadsheet for instructions that has links to the paste bin Arduino code. It has links to the RBF that they can download, the core, NES core that they can download. And you map your controller via USB, and then you open up the NES core and you hook up the Arduino to the solder points on the controller, and the Arduino goes out to the user port. The controller plugs into the USB port, and you can basically run a terminal window to actually see the results once the script starts. So it is a little bit more involved than most people want, but it's the database is, I feel pretty comfortable with the number of results in the database now to feel like it's covered most non-obscure controllers.
Yeah, it's invaluable for the community since it works everywhere. I mean, you can use those results for any other place, but it's especially important for MiSTer because people that use it are more interested in this technical part and the aspect of latency, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I was hoping the chart would spur on some of the manufacturers, at least 8-bit Do and Retrobit. And Retrobit actually responded to one of my earlier things saying, our results are much lower than what you're measuring. But,
wow.
I actually don't have many of the controllers on hand. I mean, I have the ones I like, but a lot of them are user submissions. So if there is a firmware update, it's a harder sell for me to want to update the firmware and redo the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, I'm happy to help people get started with their own testing. And that would be great if it could grow into even more of a community effort.
Yeah, crowdsourcing is the best approach here. Yeah, Porkchop can use someone else helping to test, of course.
Always.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Actually, I've been using the summarize results because the Arduino script outputs your average latency, your min, your max, and your standard deviation. But Limonichi, being a data scientist type, wants to get the raw results so we can actually see the distribution on controllers. So the next test that I do, we're going to work on the way I'm trying to remember the other guy that does all the controller testing for like the arcade fight community. Name's escaping, but yeah, he actually outputs the histogram of your results, and you can kind of see how tight that average grouping is. Is it really spread out? Is it really concise? So
that's
some
amazing.
Improvements there.
That's awesome. Also, maybe a wiki would be good to archive those results as well.
Yeah, for sure. So everyone knows software is not my forte. So if anybody wants to take the spreadsheet and Limonichi helped me get it on R pubs. He does a lot of stuff in R, which is kind of a MATLAB-esque data program. But if anybody wants to help with a wiki or anything else, let me know. I have less knowledge of running those kinds of things, and would be happy to collaborate with somebody.
If I'm not saying that you should do it there, but there's the upscaler wiki, the classic upscaler wiki that I run, and we've been pushing anything wiki related to retro consoles and whatever there. If that helps and somebody wants to go there, it's there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so another question that we have. Now that you both know so much about controllers, do you have any plans to make original controllers or arcade sticks and controls?
Mick, you want to take that one?
Yeah, okay. Well, actually, I would be really interested in making something. And I have been chatting with Porkchop about this also, casually, to maybe it would be some kind of dream project to do. But yes, it would be really a lot of fun to make something like a dream gamepad, like controller for MiSTer. That would be nice.
Unfortunately, in this scenario, Mick's all the brains and I'm just the cheerleader. So I'm happy to help with production. He's a genius there, so I would be happy to collaborate with him.
Yeah, there's a lot of sentiments here. Walter says that 6 uniform SNES style buttons in front with a Saturn D-pad. Nice ergonomic shape. I bet there's a huge wish list of favorites. Speaking about that, do you have any favorite controller in general terms? Or a favorite D-pad or a button layout? From your personal perspective, not saying for this project.
Yeah, I like that idea. In fact, yeah, Mordecai is he's a great person to have in the community. And when I was making my MiSTer Portable, not that I've totally discontinued that, just haven't focused on it. That was the goal. And I have a 3D modeled 2-piece Saturn D-pad that I printed out on my resin printer. And the tolerance on things for 3D modeling when you have pieces that fit together is just really tough. And I've not mastered the resin style 3D print. But I like that idea. In fact, I just got a Hori Fighting Commander Pro controller, which is a Super Nintendo D-pad and 6 Super Nintendo buttons for the, I think the Wii, like the Wii Classic style controller thing. So I'm going to see how I like that. But what about you, Mick?
Yeah, I really like the 8-bit DOE M30 controller, actually. And the D-pad on that one is, I don't know if is it like a model from the Saturn D-pad or?
I believe it's the M30 is the Sega Genesis one. No, I love that one.
It uses pretty much the Saturn style D-pad, from what I can tell.
Okay.
My only complaint about the M30, because I love it, I absolutely love it. I hate that X, Y, and Z on Sega controllers are always smaller or different shapes.
Oh yeah.
But you also run into problems if you make them full size because everything gets so crowded. So I don't have any great solutions, but I agree 6 full size buttons and a Saturn D-pad would be awesome.
Yep.
And I do have I have lots of other side projects in the work, but I do have another controller related thing. Just I'm dreaming up and sketching, but it's not a traditional controller. It would be something more arcade oriented, but no real concrete plans enough to announce anything yet.
Nice. Belgercat asks us, my question to Mick is, if he's planning to make an adapter for the Wii remote controller port. I like a lot the Wii Classic Pros controllers for retro games, and it would be good or great to use with MiSTer.
Yes, I have been planning to do that, but I haven't found the time yet for it, so hopefully I will be able to do it sometime in the near future.
Mick, do you have a Patreon of any sort?
The problem is the Finnish law does not really allow Patreon. So, well, maybe if you hack something up, you can do it. But yeah,
bummer. I'm sure lots of people would love to support you, and maybe even I don't know. Some people don't like Patreon because they feel beholden to it, but for the pay-per release thing, I'm sure people would love to support any development, buy some of your time, as it were.
Yes, I'm sure, and it's been a bit problematic because that's I would really like to focus my time on developing new stuff that people can use instead of having to finance the projects in other ways.
Yeah, maybe we can collaborate there and help free up some of your time if that works out.
That would be great.
Trevi Krama mentions that he has some way to donate to Finnish translator he knows. So maybe there are some other ways as the ones that Porkchop mentioned. That would be good.
Yes.
And if you guys have any more questions, please post them in the chat. We'll be reading them. Meanwhile, what do you sell pre-configured bundles, Porkchop, and what I'm going to ask is, there are several different profiles for users out there, and the pre-configured bundles are targeted for those. Can you describe what these are and what the people's or user profile are for those?
Sure. Are you talking about like the different I/O board hardware configurations you can get with the bundle? Sure.
Exactly. What they need, what those mean, what to expect, and what people need, right?
Yep. So the heart of the MiSTer, of course, is the DE10 Nano. Much to people's chagrin, it doesn't have a full-size USB port on it. It has a USB on-the-go port, which is a micro USB port. So that results in the need of having some kind of USB hub, or at least a single full-size USB to micro USB adapter. The problem with not having a hub of any sort is you can never really map your controls easily. There are workarounds, but you need some kind of USB hub, is my point. And I support the official USB hub designed by Sorge. I sell that. That's kind of the bread and butter for most people. On top of that, most cores require SDRAM, or at least benefit from SDRAM, as the timing on it is closer to the original hardware. And so SDRAM is pretty much a requirement. And then IO board is the thing that goes on top. It does a few things, actually. For one, it gives you system buttons and status LEDs that lets you know what the power is on. It has a disk LED, some stuff like that. And then it has a cooling fan, and it has depending on the style, both of them have a user port, which is simply breaking out 7 different FPGA IO pins to a USB 3 port. And that's where your MT32s, your MT32 Pi, which is a great project we haven't talked about, your Snack, and your Blister LLAPI things connect to get basically to bypass the Linux part. But to get to the main question is digital versus standard. I have a chart on my site, and the basic gist is, if you never ever think you're going to do analog video, or if you want analog video but you never want dual analog and digital video simultaneously, then I would do the digital IO board, because it frees up one of the 2 pin headers, so you can have dual SDRAM, etc. Now, currently, none of the cores use dual SDRAM. That may change in the future, so for that reason, I recommend digital to people who don't care about analog or don't care about dual video output. And then analog is for the standard, I call it standard, but with the one with the VGA port on it, I would recommend to everyone who cares about dual video output. So if you're a streamer and you want to capture on one and play on the other, that's a great option. And that's I sell probably 80% standard and 20% digital.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned exactly the MT32 Pi project, we had a program based on around what MT32 Pi does. You can listen to it here on the channel. But what can you tell us about this, and what do you need to connect one?
So for that, Mick, did you want to talk about? I mean, you're a MIDI person, so do you want to talk about that?
No, I'm not really familiar with the Pi version. So
no, you have the MIDI in your site. You have the MIDI software, right? The boutique MIDI converter.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can take the MT32. So this is something. Unfortunately, I had every intent to support the MT32 hardware when it came out. In fact, I helped make a prototype board for it, and then it came out right in the middle of my big move, and I haven't yet. But MT32 Pi is a project that Dopefish has, where he wrote the Roland MT32 is a MIDI box that was very, very popular for PC gaming, music, etc. He wrote a low-level kernel for it on the Raspberry Pi, so it does very fast emulation of the MIDI protocol. It emulates different. You can load different sound fonts, meaning different note packages, basically tone packages, and you hook up your Pi to a little board, and you hook up that board to the user I/O port of the I/O board, and then cores that support it, mostly computer cores, they can use that basically MIDI feedback from the Raspberry Pi as if it was a MIDI external MIDI box. And
so also an audio mixer, right? Because it sends the audio so that it's mixed with the MT31, the MT32, right?
That's right. So like I said, I'm not a computer core person. In other words, I love them and appreciate them. I just don't know as much about them. But it looks like there are some advanced features too. And I've been talking with Dopefish just to show support and get some feedback on ideas I have. So I'm working on some MT32 stuff, but I'm going to try to add a little bit different flair to it than what the standard thing is. So I guess more to come on that in the next few weeks or months.
And now that you mention it, while the audience shoots some more questions, I wanted to touch on the subject of you guys creating community and being trying to reach out to people, bring them in, and pamper them into the community. And I really admire that, and thank you for that. What's the value that you see in doing that?
Well, I think there are a lot of really smart people out there. In fact, I look at the audience here, and there are people who know way more than me about almost every, subject I'm interested in, from hardware developers to software people to people with lots of gameplay experience and knowledge. And I think as the MiSTer community grows, hopefully in a positive direction, you just bring in all this outside knowledge and the contributions just roll in. So, there is some, it's not without its downsides. In other words, if you get a lot of very casual people flowing in, the help channel, or you might have, doing a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of that I try to take care of on my site. But there's so many people who love retro games and who are very knowledgeable that could make the project even better.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's been really interesting to see how this community has grown, and all the people that are, just as you mentioned, so knowledgeable about many things that teach us every day about more stuff. Because people think that retro stuff is completely solved, right, in many ways, but there's so much to investigate, preserve, document, and just plainly improve upon, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even the work Mick is doing, people love original controller. There's a big schism kind of between digital, like LCD or OLED technology, and CRTs, and it's just a never-ending debate. Well, for a long time before we had the latency tests, the same thing about controllers. It was non-stop original controllers versus modern, and so Mick is very much satiating, along with Boot Sector, that need of, I want to use my original Genesis controller on MiSTer, and I don't want extra latency.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
indeed.
agree.
Mm-hmm.
Original controllers are really nice because it gives the more like the proper experience. Like the controllers are such a big thing, like a big thing of the gaming experience. So being able to use the correct controllers is great.
It's a tangible experience, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so. And we're at the very bottom of the latency of what it can be. If you think about 1 millisecond polling, if you average out any large number of polls, and if there is zero added latency from MiSTer or the controller, your average would be 0.5 milliseconds, and we're at 0.7 milliseconds. And the MiSTer itself, the Linux kernel, probably has, in my estimation, 0.2 milliseconds. So I don't think there's any more performance we can really squeeze out of these adapters. They're pretty much rock bottom, as good as it's ever going to get.
Yes, indeed. It's possible to, we are talking like microseconds almost now to improvements. Yeah.
And Matt Hargret asks us, I don't know if we have an answer to this. Are there any opportunities for deep color or HDR support over the existing HDMI controller, the former being used over HDMI 1.3 and later being shown to work over HDMI 1.4b on original PS4? I believe that the Jurassic board has the specification does have the spec for HDMI in it, right? I can't recall what it was, but I searched for it once.
I don't know that exact answer. I know that a lot of it has to do with the pixel clock, and the more depth you do, that affects it. But I'm no expert there, so I'm not gonna say whether it is or is not possible. It would be nice though.
Same here. And Matt Haggard asks us, are there any features from the analog products that aren't in MiSTer yet that they'd personally like to see come to MiSTer?
people really like native controllers, and so the one thing about Snack that's kind of a hindrance. First of all, the hindrance to Snack is that USB controllers and USB adapters like DaemonBite are so good that for gameplay it's not noticeable. But the problem with Snack is because it bypasses the Linux portion, the ARM portion of the FPGA, you can't control the menu system using a Snack controller. So you always have to have some other controller or keyboard to navigate to load your game. And then once you're in game, you can play using the Snack controller. That's one of those things that's continuously requested for. But when you think about it, you'd have to decode the original protocol, kind of like DaemonBite's doing, in the FPGA core, pass it back over to the ARM Linux side to then pass it back. It's pretty much concisely been said, this is not going to happen and move on kind of thing. But that's something that people really want or would like to have.
I'm actually, for the MiSTer case, I have been working on like a combination of USB and Snack. So the adapter could like on the fly, or you do a button combination to switch between Snack and USB.
Wow, that'd be nice.
But it's work in progress. So I have it working one way to switch from USB to Snack mode, but to switch then back from Snack mode to USB is much more involved, because then you need to analyze the signals that comes from MiSTer and is sent to the controller. So it's more difficult.
Yes, it is. And just as we've mentioned, regarding the input lag and everything, it's basically a baseline for human perception, right? If you use USB, and Snack is more like how can I put it? People want the best is something that always happens. That when people know that something is in some way the best, it doesn't mean that it's the best for every case, or that the second best in terms of something technical is not perfect in terms of perception. And maybe that's what's happening with Snack in this regard, right?
Yeah, people seem to like Snack, and I still sell some, but it is for MiSTer is already kind of for the purist segment. I say purist, and I understand the cores aren't perfect, but it's the enthusiast retro gamers, and then there's a segment of that community who also wants original controls, and so it's kind of a subgroup of a subgroup of gaming, but the demand is there, and thankfully Snack exists for those people. And there's some other interesting, there's some other interesting Snack development that I've been looking at, but again, too early to say anything.
Yeah, and Sentient mentions light guns, and that's also a fact, right? Snack for light guns is a necessity.
It's pretty much probably the number one use. If I had to guess, I don't actually know how customers are using or how MiSTer users are using Snack, but light guns, you can't easily do light guns without Snack. And the first time I played Duck Hunt on my Astro City candy cabinet, the orientation and the position of that screen is the most comfortable way I've ever played a light gun game. So I definitely see the appeal.
Yeah, I remember your tweet regarding that. Yeah, it looked amazing because you posted a picture, right? Or a video, I don't recall.
Yeah, I think it was a video. So much has happened since then, it's hard to remember.
Yeah, and probably it was just like 3 weeks ago, I don't know, but it feels like forever in the pandemic.
It was definitely in Maryland, so it was last year sometime, I think.
Okay, so, my memory is even more juggled than I thought.
Yeah.
And we have a question. Does Porkchop plan on going to conventions and such, or anyone else really? I'd love to see MiSTer at more cons.
Nick, are you going to any conventions?
Not now. Not anything planned. No, I wouldn't say.
Pandemic doesn't help right now.
No.
I kind of enjoy that people think I look like Kurt Russell, so I'd hate to spoil that by actually going to a convention. Although I was planning on going to Long Island Retro Gaming. I don't know if that was 2019. I think it was 2019. I was hoping to go, but I don't know. There's something about anonymity that's nice. You can't really buy that back once that's out.
Yeah, just like Shane Lynch mentions, going Kurt Russell's cosplay. I always imagined you as Kurt Russell anyway.
I'll take it.
So, regarding the conventions, they do have several advantages because it helps also to create a community. Knowing people personally, it's quite different from just chatting online. I'm certain that would help, but just as we mentioned, the pandemic is not helping here.
That is true.
So, how about future projects that you can talk about? Is there anything that you can tell us?
Mick, do you want to talk about your MiSTer case, or is that premature?
Yeah, I can say something about the MS3R case, the MiSTer case that I've been working on with Akishop. And well, it's a big project, so it takes a lot of time. We have tried to do it thoroughly to make like the best kind of version of what is available now, to have a better audio out and make the snack USB combination with four controller adapters that can be switched like cartridges. And also some other improvements to the PCBs, but it's a lot of work, so hopefully we can have something more concrete to show sometime soon.
Because you have a lot of edges to round up there, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
It's UX is hard to deal with.
Yes.
Yeah,
so,
it's a slow process to design hardware, just because you have to lock down the PCB form factor, then you have to build a case around that, and all of that. Those are independent things that rely on each other. So you have to, the development in one delays the development in the other, and then you have to find people to make all this stuff. It's definitely for a 1 or 2 person team, it's a lot of work, but it's very satisfying to know, hey, I designed this and this is the way it turned out.
Yeah. I can't even imagine how hard that is. With software, we have it so easy in so many ways.
And, just from my perspective, I'm working on an updated I/O board that has an I2S DAC on it, same one I'm using in MiSTerCade.
Wow.
That's people's main complaint about the analog I/O board is the audio could be better. So I think my prototypes come tomorrow from JLC PCB, and also looking at getting the RGB levels closer to spec, because they're either a little bit too dark or a little bit too bright, depending on which network resistor value you're using for the digital to analog R2R DAC. So I picked some other values that I'm going to see how it turns out, but some things like that, adding some ESD protection to the FPGA pins, and same with the USB hub, adding ESD protection and some other things to the USB hub. But I'll happily announce it if it all works out.
That sounds amazing, because precisely I had several questions about the analog out in my show on Fridays, and if I recommended it. And obviously the main idea with the analog audio in the current design of the I/O board is just it's a convenience, right? Because people should use HDMI in most scenarios. And if it helps out, I did make some software called MD4E that could help you determine the performance of any DAC such as this.
Yeah, I'll happily help or ask for help or provide you hardware or whatever it takes.
No hardware is needed, but yeah.
Yeah, I know all about the project stuff.
I can help out with anything in that regard.
Great. Well, if you have a MiSTerCade, it's the same circuit, so we could probably just do that.
I do have it. Yeah, I have it. I haven't run MD4E through it, but we can check it out, and I can tell you, it's amazing. Okay. The MiSTerCade works really, really great.
Yeah, the one thing I'd love to see, but it's this is another somewhat interesting question, is people say, I hear the analog video out of MiSTer is garbage, unless you're using direct video, because you're on 6-bit or 18-bit RGB versus 24. In other words, you get 6-bit per color, 6 bits for red, green, and blue. The original, and this has come up several times, but just to recap, the original hardware on most of these systems was 6-bit or less. Now, there's some advantage to having more color depth than you're using. Of course, people always bring up, well, filters can use them, etc., which is fine. But Amiga in a special color mode and the main menu core are the only cores, to my knowledge, that can use 8-bit. But that might change with PlayStation and Saturn. The problem with using 8-bit RGB is you would need to steal all of the I/O from the secondary SD card, which I'm totally happy with. But some cores, I think the ZX Spectrum Next, only has support using that secondary SD slot. So time will tell which one wins out.
Shane Lynch says, throw secondary SD card into the ocean.
I wish.
Yeah, but there's... It's really hard to just break stuff. It has to be a coordinated effect, but it's not easy, right?
Yeah, Shane's a great developer, so he knows. But MiSTer has all the GPIO for the FPGA are predefined, and in each core that MiSTer supports has a lot of that integrated into the sys portion. So to change input or output on it, which is why low-level API is still a fork, because every core that supports it has to have it built into this. So it's not a small change. You basically have to modify every core. So it's easier if you can just get the feature request accepted than it is to maintain some fork of something for some portion of users.
Indeed. And you did mention the 8-bit and 16-bit, 6-bit RGB DACs, right? And you can also use those external HDMI to let's say, quote-unquote PGA converters, right? Which would solve that for many people that do prefer it. But I believe that 6-bit is, just as you mentioned, more than enough in general terms for everything we have.
I think usually the low-pass filter ends up being your analog CRT. Like that ends up being something which a lot of people point out is a lot of these CRTs aren't in great shape. So the extra bit depth isn't really needed. I say to that, agreed, but also it would be nice if we could get the best analog, best digital output of MiSTer for all the development that's gone into these cores and all of the features and bug fixes. It would be nice to display it the best way possible, even if your end device unit filters out some of that benefit.
I fully agree. I'm of the belief that if you can do things better and it's for preservation, you have to push for that, because when preserving, for example, floppies or a book, I don't want to take too much time on this, but if you have a book for from the 1500s and you scan it, you can have the version of the book that's just the text, right? Without illustrations, without the fonts, without the paper, without the texture of the scans, without the coffee stains or whatever. But there's going to be somebody that does need that for investigation or for documentation or academic papers or something. Same thing can happen here. There are different levels of consumption, but that doesn't mean that the, let's say, quote-unquote lowest consumption with the lowest grade CRT won't be benefited by having a better source.
Yep. Mick, are you how much into analog versus digital are you? I mean, I know you have your MIDI stuff going on, but what about for audio video stuff?
Well, for video stuff, I prefer CRT, to analog video, just because how it looks. And the games were kind of designed or drawn for that, for the CRT smoothness and scrolling. But since I got a variable fresh rate, like modern screen, it's not that. It's much better also because you get really smooth scrolling and so on that. So I'm fine.
Yeah, but we already have the interpolation in horizontal and integers in vertical, that helps a lot.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I think so much of what MiSTer users enjoy is the overall experience, because emulators have been sharp and they've had filters and fake scan lines and stuff for a long time. So MiSTer can maybe at best match some of those offerings, but not many things can you hook up to an original controller, an analog output to a CRT, and just play conveniently. It's like there's definitely, it's not the majority of people that enjoy that, but there's something to be said about recreating the original experience, even if modern LCDs approach with variable refresh rate and color depth and stuff, if they approach the look of a CRT.
I agree. And speaking about that, I do love having the dual output. I love the analog out from the MiSTer. I use it a lot. And but how do you guys feel about composite video and the artifacts that can be made with dithering there?
Well, I made a couple of Mike Cheese from RetroTink. He made an open source thing for MiSTer that outputs S video, RGB, and composite. And I made a simplified version of one, kind of like what Antonio sells from Spain. And the composite, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't buy one of them just for the composite output, which is a shame because here in the US, it's mostly composite TVs that you're going to find. But the S video is really good. And I have another prototype coming tomorrow that has a tunable Luma trap to see if I can clean up the composite. But there might be a better solution at a lower level in the future for composite video, because it's just not great. I would feel bad, setting anyone's expectations very high on the current state of composite video for MiSTer.
Yeah, I also prefer RGB output. It's so good with a CRT.
I fully understand you guys, because I ditched composite like in 2007 when I started with RGB mods and all that stuff and scalers and PBMs and all that craze. But I can understand the point for composite out because several factors. And last year we were working precisely with Trainix and Mike Chi and several others regarding colors for PC Engine, for example. And I went back to composite for those because you need to use composite for vector scopes, and we wanted to compare that. And I used the Super Emotion that converts RGB to composite, and it's not the best, but it looked amazing. Obviously, I'm taking RGB out from the MiSTer and transcoding that to composite using 2000s equipment that doesn't do perfect color conversion, but the transparencies and artifacts that are gained on certain games are amazing. And I don't know if you've played with the filter from the Genesis core that does this adaptively from dithering.
Yeah, I've used that. I think that was one that Electron Ash was working on and ended up in the core. And it's pretty cool. I mean, like you said, these games were designed with that in mind. Nowadays, people have preferences every end of the spectrum of how the game should look. But it's nice that MiSTer can represent most options. And hopefully, I mean, a native composite output would be amazing. There's, I guess, the Tetris, competitive Tetris play world. They have a whole bunch of composite CRTs and original NESs, and that's how you play. That's their bread and butter.
Yeah, it's not that I play in composite, but I do like. Most precisely, I was amazed on how good it looked when converted from the MiSTer last year when we made all those measurements. And the other point that it's to be made, it's color space, because just as Trainix pushed that palette for on the team for PC Engine, we figured out, or well, we didn't figure out. We worked on improving that palette because it had been figured out by several people across a couple of decades that the PC Engine colors on composite were not the exact same matches as on RGB, and having composite is a historical important factor to have the proper colors and the proper look, or a simulation of it, of course, because we are just trying to recreate the past, but it will help people to understand and to experience. I believe that having options is really important for having a healthier community.
Yeah, I very much look forward to the idea of having a composite. Again, all the TVs I come across here locally, just, Facebook Marketplace, or I became good friends with this electronics recycler, and most of the TVs you see here in the US are composite. So even if it's not people's preference, you still get the feel of analog out. In fact, I found a 14-inch PVM there. I offered him $40 and he took it. So I got a new Sony 14-inch PVM the other day. So lucked into that.
Yeah. So regarding that, what setups do you have, guys?
I have, let's see, a TCL 2021 LED LCD TV, and I have a 27-inch Toshiba hooked up to it with MiSTer, and then I have several candy cabinets I've been testing MiSTercade with, and then it's probably more CRTs than my wife would like just floating around, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have a 20-inch Sony Trinitron CRT connected to my. I really like the 20-inch size because you can move it easily and so on. So I really like it.
And they asks us, what improvements would the panel like to see in some of the post-processing filters like scanlines, soft, etc.?
Well, because I play on CRT so much, the filters often, they're lost on me a little bit. But I do really enjoy some of the core specific ones, like the filters for SNES that has a different resolution. And I find that some of those have a nice balance between softness and sharpness. And in terms of scan lines, I mean, I've played with MAME and done the crazy CRT Royale shaders and stuff. And to me, I'm happy with some 50%, scan line and medium sharpness on LCD. That's my preference.
And how about you, Mick?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Porkchop. Like, I love scan lines, so I'm quite happy with. It doesn't need to look perfect, in my opinion, to proper CRT. And I also enjoy like a really sharp image, like even with just like this nearest neighbor scaling, no filters. I can. For me, I find it more important that the scrolling is smooth.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. No shimmering, right?
Yeah.
One thing I really like about MiSTer is it distills down your options. I mean, of course, you could do whatever you want developmentally because it's open source for filters or whatever, but I really enjoy that I don't have, like when I have to adjust MAME and I'm going through the video settings and MAME, you just 30 settings in a row you're adjusting and you just kind of get lost in the configuration. I like that MiSTer kind of encourages you sit down, configure a few things, and just play. It kind of is less distracting in that regard.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree on that. And having the same options across the whole board helps a lot, right? That standardization. You already know what you want. Although in some cases, for example, if you're playing Game Boy, you select different options, of course. Like you don't want the same kind of scanlines. I mean, you can, but at least myself, I try to match and select the LCD filters, which are amazing.
Those are really good.
Yeah, it looks. I was playing Advance Wars last week on that, and it was impressive. I hadn't played with that in particular.
Yeah, it's just. I feel like MiSTer has almost all the options you want, and not too many you don't need. I mean, you need to touch most things. I've tried on the setups that I sell. I don't include any games, of course, anything that's IP, but I do try to set up all my entire database of input mappings for the main system, so you can plug a controller in and get started. And then Fredo helped me make a script. I basically went and took measurements on all of the major cores for audio output because they vary wildly, especially the arcade cores. They're all over the place in terms of loudness, and then we made a little script that's probably outdated now, but to automatically set each core's volume level to match the PC Engine core, which is the softest output core. So it kind of brings all the other core levels, audio levels down to the PC Engine. So you get at least less variation switching between cores.
Oh, that's really, really interesting, and I bet a lot of people would love that.
Yeah, I'm sure someone that's more talented could do a little bit better job with it, but it works. It's just you gotta do it for every core. You have to kind of normalize the audio to that, and you only get each volume tick, and the volume adjustment is twice as loud or twice as soft, 6 dB adjustments. So it's pretty coarse, but again, you can get it pretty close.
And that's something that when I was getting the MiSTer, thanks to you guys last year, I was really interested in that, because video and audio levels, and they are like an idealized version, and that's something that I didn't quite know what to expect, because it was until I was fixing that DAC from or experimenting with the DAC in the I/O board, and that I understood that it's an idealized version that saves you so much trouble. What I mean is, if you have the original hardware for arcade PCVs and systems like a PC Engine or an SNES, you have to change the volume when you change hardware. You have to probably recalibrate the levels when you switch arcade boards. You have to change even the geometry on the CRT. You have to adjust it. And the idea with MiSTer is that it's idealized in terms of levels. Like the whitest white, it's going to be the same on the PC Engine and the SNES and the Genesis and Strider on CPS1. And you don't have to mess with the controls, right? Even though there's a standard in terms of what it's supposed to be, the variations between systems are real. When you change between a Genesis and a Super NES on your PBM, one is a few pixels to the right and one is a few pixels to the left, right? The dot clocks change, everything of that. And same with volume. But you have an analog version of that's standardized to idealized versions, and I like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's why it pulled me out of the original hardware world, because I was doing the jailbar fixes on my Genesis, and I had a couple PC Engine core graphics. One of them had all kinds of graphic problems, and you deal with the routing of the original signals on the original hardware, and MiSTer just kind of bypasses most of that. It doesn't have, it's not perfect, but it really gets you started at a really good place.
Yeah, it's so much easier. I really like measuring and comparing the differences, but it's a hassle. It's just because I like to tinker with them, but I can see somebody dealing with that frustration with so many systems, right? It's just out of love if you do it.
Totally. One thing somebody asked, many people ask, and this relates to the question about features I'd like to see, and it's because I love analog video so much, which might not be rational, but they would love to see either built into the sys or per core video adjustments for horizontal and vertical positioning. Some arcade cores have them in, but the arcade cores do, at least on my arcade machines, that the output is shifted still, because they either follow the original schematic and the blanking is different. For various reasons, people would love adjustable analog video per core.
Yeah, that's a touchy subject, because just as you mentioned, with consoles they are following kind of the NTSC standard, and you can idealize them and center them, right? Or follow the exact pixel clock, and you get the exact same thing as if you have the PC Engine connected to the same CRT, right? In terms of centering, it's as close as it can be right now. But the same thing is true with arcade boards. People didn't experiment this, or most people didn't, but whoever collects arcade PCVs knows that when you plug in CPS2 and you plug in a Neo Geo, you have to readjust white, black, and horizontal and vertical size, not just centering. You have to change everything. And with MiSTer, it in terms of the analog output, it has to be the same way. I can see a way to just like if you change it, you're going to deform the geometry.
Yeah, the only thing you could do is really shift it around. So some of the arcade cores have horizontal and vertical positioning, and that's it. But nothing to make it wider or taller or narrower or shorter, because again, you're messing with the pixel clock at that point.
Yeah, and you have to do it every single time you change cores. You'll have to change those for arcade, right?
Yep. And the latest core that I've experienced, this was kind of funny, was Arcade V-Ball, the recent core that Pierco made, and the resolution on that original arcade game is really odd. It's like it's kind of almost a vertical orientation within a horizontal Yoko frame, so it doesn't fill the sides, and it's kind of interesting. I think he got it working well enough with analog out.
Yeah, that's arcade is such a wild territory for that. Does pinball, in terms of the visual pinball that you mentioned at the adaptive refresh rates, of course it's simulated an analog thing, but the screens, does this come up for LED simulated screens, Mick?
Yeah, it's. I'm not sure I understood the question. I'm a bit tired here in the night.
Oh no, it's quite late. Yes. We're almost finished, Mick.
No problem. But yeah.
What I'm asking is there some kind of equivalence in terms of the visual pinball about changing the resolution of the screen or the sizes or the refresh rates, because there's so much variation in pinball?
Yeah, well, in the pinball, it's the playing field is the most important. So you want as high resolution as possible with as high refresh rate as possible, because you're emulating like a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the real thing doesn't have like this.
Yeah, of course.
It's yes, but it's, you can get really close now with the. Like it feels almost like a real pinball game, I would say.
Yeah, I have to experiment some of that someday.
I would love an original pinball cabinet, but which one do you get? They're expensive. It's electromechanical, so there's maintenance. I just can't let myself fall down that rabbit hole, because it's a whole nother world.
Space, man. Space,
yep.
Yeah, that's why the visual pinballs are so great, because you can have a lot of boards in one machine.
Yep, I like that idea.
Yeah, I have a friend here that does have like a few hundred pinballs like those, and man, it's always like several dozen of them are broken down. And I can understand. The same happens with arcade PCBs, right? It's like you open up your box and take out the Striker's PCB, and then you don't have rev. And it's like, oh man, I have to go and diagnose this again. Because stuff breaks down.
For a reason, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Stuff breaks down because people might not think about this much, but vibration, drops, any heat to an arcade circuit board or game cartridge could affect it. People think that it's because it's solid state, it's invulnerable to the elements, and it is not, right? It decays.
Yep. Cold joints happen too.
Yeah, cold joints happen, and the bond wires get loose, and even though the silicon inside is working, it's not connected to the outside, right?
Yep. I had an old, this is totally different, but I had an old Honda from the early 90s, and I went to get in it one day and it just wouldn't start. And yeah, it was the solder joints on the starter relay. Easiest mechanical fix car fix I've ever had to do, but hard to troubleshoot. Electrical stuff's really tough to troubleshoot unless you're expert at it.
Yeah, you made me remember, now that we were talking about MIDI, also an SC55 that I bought that was broken. It was just cold solder on the AC adapter.
Oh,
so typical, right?
The easiest of all.
Yeah.
Very typical. A lot of mechanical stress.
Yeah, same happens with PC Engine and Genesis and Super Nintendos, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stress there. And speaking of which, you also have to several products for the splitting the USB hub and the D10 Nano, right, from the power supply. Sourcing power supplies, I bet, was a big issue, and the switches for power, right? Because some people, like myself, love just like shutting it off with the physical switch.
Yep. Yeah, there was a lot that went into that. It's interesting. I've pretty much determined that the issue people have, and it's really if you put a mechanical hard drive on the USB hub, or if you're using a Wi-Fi adapter, they're separate problems. The Wi-Fi adapters really want 5.0 volts, much below that, like even 4.9, and they get grumpy. They just won't work. Mechanical hard drives draw so much current off the ports that you end up with a voltage drop, which pulls the voltage down. Also, some people run multiple wire, like 3 8-bit DOE adapters, and those draw enough current. So it's this balance of the D10 Nano's power supply outputs 5.2 volts open circuit. When you hook everything up, it drops it to like maybe 5.05 volts. Then you have a very narrow from 5.05 to 5 volts to work with adding any extra voltage drop with a switch. So I actually just recently got a whole new shipment of splitter and switches, 1,000 of them, and
Wow.
the factory used 22 gauge wiring, and it dropped the voltage down to 4.95 volts out of the gate with nothing connected. And so I had to eat that cost and had them redo it. But I found that with 18 gauge wiring, which is the thickest they'll do, that those inline switches really haven't been a problem for a long time, thankfully.
Yeah, it's interesting now that you mention it, because a lot of people don't think much about the gauge of the wire, and it's so important in arcade. Like many of the issues that I've seen in some setups, it's because they don't use the proper gauge for power in arcade JAMA cabling, and I bet that you will find that in MiSTerCade someday. I hope it doesn't, but improperly made cables, harnesses are a big issue.
My hope with MiSTerCade is that because I'm generating 5 volt off of a 12 volt regulator on board, I'm only using a 12 volt line. And I did that. Some of my testers weren't thrilled because they're purists, and JAMA spec specifies plus 5 volts, minus 5 volts, and 12 volts. Well, I already wasn't doing anything with minus 5 volts, except I have a small load resistor just to keep that line active. But I used I'm only using a 12 volt line for everything because arcade power supplies vary. You have to adjust them for each board, and I think that there are going to be a lot of new arcade owners who just plug it in and either over or undervolt. So to save myself emails, I'm just using the 12 volt regulator to generate 5 volt on board, and I'm hoping that means that any arcade system connected will have adequate power. Hoping.
That's really wise from you, yes, because telling people that they need to adjust for 5 volts in arcade PCBs is I run an arcade site in Mexico, and it's really hard to make them understand that that's something that they need to change every single PCB they switch. You have to check voltage, you have to check audio levels, and you have to check video levels, right, and geometry.
Yeah, it was hard to break away from the standard, but I also think in the long run this is a better solution. The MiSTer doesn't actually draw too much. It's about a 5 to a 7 watt device, and then add some to that if you have lots of dongles or hard drives hanging off. But it's a pretty low powered device, so I haven't found in all my testing, which is like probably 10 to 20 cabinets across all the testers, no issues with power with this 12 volt version. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it's going to be good for everyone. But like you said, arcade hardware is wild. Everything from the JAMA harness all the way back to the power supply, everything's different. So it will be interesting.
Yeah, I bet. I'm guessing you don't have much issues with power, Mick, with the controllers and the gauge from the USB current that you draw from the port?
No, not really, because the USB is like it doesn't come from the DE10 Nano, since it uses like the USB boards like get power directly from the power supply. So it's normally it's not a problem.
That's reassuring, because dealing with that is a pain.
Yeah.
Mick, have you had any people complain about their micro USB not working? But I think 8-Bit Do sells some of their controllers with a power-only micro USB cable, which I don't know why they do that nowadays, but there are no data wires. Have you had that issue with anybody?
Yes, yeah, that's good point. Yeah, I have had some questions about that, like customers asking why it's not working, and it's probably like usually been the power only USB cable.
Such a shame to save a half cent. I mean, nowadays micro USB cables, you trip over them. They're not wired up for data, and then not market and people not know. What a headache.
Yes, yeah.
So we're closing. We're getting close to the end of this program. If you guys have any themes that you'd like to mention, or stuff that you'd like to promote or talk about, please go ahead and do so. And also the public, any closing questions that they have, please just post them.
Yeah, well, okay. One project I have been working on is I forgot to mention. Like it's, I have a few boards ready that I will hopefully be able to sell soon. Is like this one-player adapter. People have been asking me to make like this one-player adapter with SNES, NES, and Genesis ports.
Oh, really interesting.
So, but I made a combination. So the old adapters, it's a separate Genesis adapter, Mega Drive, and CD32, or like these normal classic Atari Commodore controllers, because the pinout is slightly different. So I have an auto sensing version of that. So it works with most 9-pin controllers, and then it's one SNES and one NES port on it, and it also has USB-C, so it has a more reliable connection for USB. Wow,
so many questions there. Sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I will hopefully be able to supply some of those soon.
So that would work. You have a single USB to 3 control adapters. That's one player.
Yes.
But could it be used at the same time, the 3 controllers?
Yeah, they can be used at the same time.
That's awesome. Yeah, and have Turtles game on the Super Nintendo played with a Genesis and an NES controller, right?
Yeah.
And the other question regarding the 9-pin port. Some of us have those arcade sticks that are made for X68000, PC88, MSX computers, which are kind of compatible with everything else, but not exactly. Would that kind of arcade stick or joystick be compatible? Sometimes they do have a switch to change to Genesis mode, but not all of them. That's something that you might want to consider, and in terms of not having issues.
A good point. I haven't thought about that one. Now that you say it, it was oh no.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry to bring it up, but that's the first use I thought about, because I have several of those controllers right next to me, and
yeah, I have to look into it. It's possible that I can modify the firmware, but I'm not sure. I have to see.
Yeah, and somebody asked us if there's a dual 2-player snack option covered.
Yeah, Porkchop, do you want to?
Oh no, you can say whatever you wanted to say.
Yeah, there is like a 2-player snack option. Like Antonio Villena, I think, made some Snack Plus version. So I've been thinking of adding support for that for the MSTR case, but yeah, it's work in progress, so I can't say anything specific about that.
I've been working on a 2-player snack as well, but again, I'm a basic hardware guy, and someone else has it, and they're looking at implementing it. So don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but it would be kind of the dream to have 2-player snack for the people who really want to use 2 original controllers. Or the other scenario is people use multi-taps with snack, but the issue is multi-taps for most of the consoles end up being 2-player through 5-player. So players 2, 3, 4, and 5, but not player 1 on the multi-tap. So you still need one person to be USB. So 2-player snack would be great. I have my fingers crossed it'll work out, but I don't have anything concrete to say about that right now.
And another one for Porkchop. Are you considering using a distributor in the European Union for your aluminum case?
It would be nice for the customers and hard for me, I think, because what I've found with the aluminum cases is, even though they're very nice, like the silkscreen logo on top in one color in particular, this last order I had probably 10 to 15%, maybe 20% defects in that silkscreen. And so shipping's really hard. Mick, do you agree that shipping is way more complicated than it should be?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of tricky. I don't have any distributors right now, and my thought is, as long as I'm selling enough to be happy, I would rather not work with a distributor, because it's tricky, and there are other reasons I have. But I guess for the short answer right now is no. I'm almost sold out of this round. Round 3 will be in a couple months. The factory's already started on it. And I made some modifications to the case, just tweaking it each iteration. But I don't have any plans for any other distributors, but the tax laws are changing. I mean, the UK Brexit thing already hit. Now the EU thing, they want you to charge value-added tax and remit to the EU if you're an outside company, which for a small business like me just sucks away time that I would rather be spending developing. So I may end up using eBay or something else and have to upcharge and just let eBay handle that, because it's just too draining for a small company to worry about all these different tax laws.
Yeah, it can destroy you.
Yeah, I got to keep my motivation up, because I have lots of ideas and limited time, and I don't want to be using my time on mundane, tasks like that.
Yeah, I fully understand. They ask you, Mick, you seem to know a lot about timings for different operations on an Arduino. Could I get your help adding nanoseconds of lag to the tester code?
Yeah, sure. I'm thinking he might be talking about the to make an artificial lag for the adapters to simulate lag. And I've been planning on doing something like that. It would be really nice to see, to add artificial lag to see when people start noticing the lag and so on. Blind testing.
Yep. See what human perception really is. I think in this case, it's Limanichi. He's asking about the code for the input latency testing that I've been doing. He's wanting to get more precision out. Then right now it's using the micros function. He's wondering if there's any way to get more than micros.
Yeah, okay. Well, absolutely. Shoot me an email, a message or something, a private message, and I can see if I can help.
Nice. And they asked us also, is there a favor recommendation for someone like me who wants a good low latency arcade stick or 2 for MiSTer, but isn't ready to build a full-on arcade cab or something? Any recommendations? I don't have any.
I did a bunch of arcade, off the shelf. I tested the Mayflash. I tested several of the Hori Real Arcade Pros for PS4, Switch, Xbox One, all those. And none of them are great. And I would say use a mix controller arcade adapter and wire it into whichever stick you like the form factor of. Just know, Mick, can you tell which systems that gives you output support? So you can hook it up to MiSTer or PC or Linux, right? Are there any other systems that your arcade board works with?
Not at the moment, no. I'm working on a new version that I will hopefully be able to include other support. But it's work in progress also. But the current one is like Linux, Mac, PC, and MiSTer, or of course Raspberry Pi, Linux.
But that's my opinion, is find an arcade stick you like the form factor of, and you might give up the extra systems that it's compatible with. But if you just want MiSTer, get one of Mick's adapters or make one or whatever, and wire it up to whichever stick you like and get the buttons you like. That's my opinion. Otherwise, look at the results on my spreadsheet. You can filter, or not on the spreadsheet, on the RPub site. You can filter by type. So I have all the joysticks. You can filter just the joysticks and look at them to see which ones you like.
And what's on sale, and select from there, just as Walrus says. So, we're almost done. And, well, I want to thank you guys for your time. It's been an amazing evening, a night for you, Mick. I hope you get your good night rest after this, at least some.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an honor to be on this event. I really liked it, and it's a privilege to be a part of this great community also.
No, thank you. It's been great having you, and also you, Porkchop. It's been an honor to be talking to you and learning so much from you and everything you both guys do for the community. So thank you for your time tonight and today, or depending on when people hear us. And thank you, Porkchop.
Oh yeah, thank you. It's an honor to be with Mick and Artemio and a whole bunch of these other people in the audience I see that are heroes of mine that have inspired me or helped me or whatever. So it's an honor to be here.
And I'd also like to thank, of course, Sentient Six and Katranix for giving us the space for this, and to all the community. It's been an amazing trip and learning and working with you guys. I've received so much from this community as well, in terms of knowledge and getting to know people like you. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, and good night.
Yeah, good night, Mick. Please rest after this.
Yeah.
Dream of controller combinations you can hook DaemonBite.
Yeah.
Well, take care.
All right.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.